Hello and welcome to Firstpost Vantage with me, Saroya. Let's get started. Iran says with a ceasefire in Lebanon, the Strait of Hormuz is now open. So a second round of talks could take place as soon as this weekend and a deal seems likely. Donald Trump says the war could end soon. However, the naval blockade of Iranian ports continues. While there are some positive signs, we continue to watch with cautious optimism. The war ending soon could be the out that President Trump has been wanting. Could it be that the president is realizing finally that this war was not the swift clinical operation he thought it would be? The depleted weapons arsenal would suggest so. The United States has burned through decades worth of weapons, now negatively impacting shipment to Europe. I'll tell you about that. And the State Bank of Pakistan has lifted its 8-year ban on crypto banking. Turns out being an errand boy for Washington wasn't enough. Why do I say this? Stay tuned for that report as well. And what is Ozempic personality? A phenomenon that is the emotional equivalent of a black and white filter. I'll tell you about it. All this and more lined up, but first, the headlines. The Indian government's latest constitutional bills fail in Parliament. 298 MPs in the Lok Sabha voted for it, while 230 voted against. The bills did not pass a constitutional amendment which requires a two-thirds majority. If passed, this bill would have led to 33% quota for women in Parliament and state assemblies. The United Kingdom and France invite India to join its initiative to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. The invitation comes as Macron and Starmer host a summit in Paris. The two countries are gathering allies to send a multinational force to maintain trade flow in Hormuz, but have left the United States out of this initiative. Global leftist leaders gather in Spain to mobilize against the far right. Spain's Pedro Sanchez and Brazil's Lula da Silva are hosting the leaders in Barcelona. Joining them will be South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, as well as Mexico's President Claudia Sheinbaum. The gathering will focus on defending multilateralism and mobilizing left-wing movements around the globe. Myanmar reduces the sentence of imprisoned ex-leader Aung San Suu Kyi. Frees former president who was detained in a 2021 military coup. Suu Kyi is currently serving a 27-year sentence. She has not been seen in public since the end of her marathon trials in December last year. And Kenya seeks funds from the World Bank amid Iran war disruptions. The fighting has strained the country's energy supplies. Kenya is the first developing economy to reach out to the World Bank. Around 12 others have approached the IMF. And Netflix chairman Reed Hastings steps down. He is leaving the company he co-founded 29 years ago. It comes after the company lost $72 billion deal for Warner Brothers Discovery. The company's share price fell by around 8% after the news. For weeks, the Strait of Hormuz was the symbol of this war. It represented escalation. It represented fear. It represented the risk of global economic shock. Tonight, it may represent something else, a possible turn towards de-escalation. And why do I say that? Because Iran says the Strait of Hormuz is now open. You heard that right. After nearly 7 weeks of conflict and disruption, Tehran has opened Hormuz to commercial shipping. The announcement came from Iran's Foreign Minister. His name is Abbas Araghchi. In a post on X, Araghchi said, and I'm quoting here, in line with the ceasefire in Lebanon, the passage for all commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz is declared completely open for the remaining period of ceasefire on the coordinated route as already announced by Ports and Maritime Organization of the Islamic Republic of Iran. So that is the big development tonight. And it was quickly acknowledged by US President Donald Trump. He appears to be on a posting spree today. In a post on his social media platform, Truth Social, Trump said the strait was fully open and ready for passage. He says Tehran has agreed to never close the strait again. But he also made another point. Washington's blockade of Tehran's ports will continue. Let me read that post for you as well. The Strait of Hormuz is completely open and ready for business, but the naval blockade will remain in full force and effect as it pertains to Iran. Only until such time as our transaction with Iran is 100% complete, this process should go very quickly, in that most of the points are already negotiated. The last line is the one to watch. Most of the points are already negotiated, he says. If that is accurate, it suggests both sides may now be moving to final stage bargaining. To once again give you some context, the Strait of Hormuz is a critical global oil route. Around 1/5 of the world's oil trade passes through it. When Iran disrupted trade through this critical artery, oil prices jumped, shipping risks rose, and today's announcement had an immediate impact. Oil prices dropped by more than 10%. In fact, even Wall Street's main stock indices jumped at the opening bell, indicating the optimism around a peace deal. But there's an important catch. The strait may be open, but the US blockade on Iranian ports is still in place. So this is not a full return to normalcy, it is a partial easing. At the same time, Trump claims the United States and Iran are working to remove sea mines from Hormuz. If true, that would suggest limited coordination even as pressure continues. And that tells you something important. Negotiations may be moving forward, but leverage is still being kept in place. And look at the timing. The prospect of a second round of US-Iran talks continues to grow. Washington says contacts are active. Donald Trump says a deal is within reach. And he says fresh talks could happen as soon as this weekend. Listen to this.
The next in-person
Probably, maybe over the weekend.
Are you considering extending the ceasefire with Iran?
With who?
With Iran?
We're doing very well, I can tell you. Maybe it'll happen before that. I'm not sure it needs to be extended. Just so you know, Iran wants to make a deal, and we're dealing very nicely with them.
So the tone from the White House is clearly more optimistic. Only days ago, the question was whether talks would resume. Now the question is how quickly they can produce results. Trump has also gone further than that. He says the war with Iran could end soon.
I will say the war in Iran is going along swimmingly. We can do whatever we want. And it should be ending pretty soon. It was perfect. I mean, it's perfect. It was the power we have, our military. We have the most powerful military anywhere in the world. I built it 4 years, my first 4 years.
Now, Trump has also said that if a deal is signed in Islamabad, he may personally go to Pakistan for it.
Would you ever go to Pakistan to seal the deal yourself?
I would go to Pakistan, yeah. Pakistan has been great. They've been so good. Islamabad, I might go, yeah. If the deal is signed in Islamabad, I might go. The field marshal has been great. The prime minister has been really great in Pakistan. So I might go. They want me.
Now, to put this into perspective for you, Islamabad hosted the first round of talks last weekend. That round did not produce a deal, but it kept the process alive. And it is still being seen as the most likely venue for round 2. Pakistan's Army Chief Field Marshal Asim Munir has been in Tehran since Wednesday. He has met Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian and other senior officials. Pakistan's Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif is also now in Turkey. That follows visits to Saudi Arabia and Qatar, so multiple channels are now active. Several capitals are now involved, and reports suggest the negotiations have entered a more serious phase. United States and Iranian officials are said to be discussing a 3-page framework to end the war. One key idea under discussions is that the United States could release billions of dollars in frozen Iranian funds. In return, then, Iran would give up most or all of its enriched uranium stockpile. Iran's uranium stockpile has been at the center of this crisis. Washington wants it neutralized, but Iran wants economic relief first. Yesterday, Trump made a reference to it. Take a look.
So, very important is that Iran does not have a nuclear weapon, and they've agreed to that. Iran's agreed to that, and they've agreed to it very powerfully. They've agreed to give us back the nuclear dust that's way underground because of the attack we made with the B-2 bomber. So we have a lot of agreement with Iran, and I think something's going to happen very positive.
Meanwhile, reports say other options are also set to be on the table. Part of the stockpile could be moved to a third country. Part could be downblended under international monitoring. But the differences remain, especially over future enrichment. The United States wants a longer freeze. Iran wants a shorter timeline. But Donald Trump has pushed back on these reports. He says no money would exchange hands in any deal with Iran. In fact, Tehran has also not responded to this particular report yet. But by now, I'm sure we all know the Iranian position already. Just to recap this for you, Tehran says its nuclear program is peaceful. It insists civilian enrichment is a national right, and it wants any deal to respect Iranian interests.
Iran's inalienable rights, as recognized under international law, are indisputable. Iran's right to the peaceful use of nuclear energy is not something that has been granted to us, nor is it something that can be taken away under pressure or through war.
So what does all of this mean tonight? It means the atmosphere has clearly improved, that diplomacy has gained momentum, and that both sides see value in keeping talks alive. So that may be a good sign. But momentum is not the same as agreement. The blockade is still in place. The hard issues are still unresolved. Plus, nothing has been signed yet. No date has been formally announced, and no venue has been finalized. The reopening of Hormuz is the strongest sign so far that tempers are cooling. But the real test now is simple. Can these positive signals turn into a real deal? So it's 9:13 p.m. Indian Standard Time, and less than a day into the 10-day ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon, the truce is already seeing cracks. The Lebanese army is reporting multiple violations. Hezbollah says it is keeping its finger on the trigger, and Israeli troops remain deployed in southern Lebanon, fueling fears that Israel may be preparing to permanently reoccupy southern Lebanon. The truce may have stopped bombs on Beirut, but will this truce hold? Because what happens here does not just stay here. This ceasefire is important for US President Donald Trump. Finding himself unable to get out of an unpopular war, Trump needs a win, and he needs a win fast. Just hours ago, in a Truth Social post, Trump denied reports of a US-Iran deal involving the transfer of highly enriched uranium in exchange for $20 billion in frozen assets. He rejected Iran's attempt to link this deal to the Lebanon ceasefire, stating that the United States would address the Hezbollah situation separately. Trump added, and I'm quoting here, Israel will not be bombing Lebanon any longer. They are prohibited from doing so by the United States. Remember, Iran had insisted that any agreement with the United States must also include Lebanon. Already, the truce between the United States and Iran is on shaky ground. This parallel conflict in Lebanon feeds into the larger context. Trump hopes the Lebanon truce will give him more breathing space to navigate the end of the Hormuz crisis and wind down the Iran war.
Get back, get back, get back, get back!
As the ceasefire took effect, celebrations broke out in Lebanon. As people took to the streets to light fireworks, cars honked, crowds cheered, singing and making victory signs. The Lebanese army told residents of the south not to return, citing several Israeli acts of aggression. Nonetheless, footage from the ground early morning showed packed cars heading southwards along Lebanon's coastal highway right before dawn. Many of these were people who had fled their homes and amid sweeping Israeli evacuation warnings. Now, with the truce, they hope to return to their homes, even if that meant undertaking perilous journeys, like crossing the remains of a bridge severely destroyed in Israeli airstrikes.
Despite that, the Hezbollah and Nabi Berri told people not to come back directly to their villages and to wait a bit, but their love for their lands and houses and their attachment to them pushed them to go back there despite the fire threats, to go back to their houses and lands.
We have children. Kids got scared, so we came here to feel secure, and we hope to come back to our houses. We were waiting for this moment, but we are still hesitant, as sometimes they tell us, yes, go, sometimes no.
Across the border in Israel, the military's Home Front Command had not yet removed restrictions on civilian movements in vulnerable border areas. Still, some civilians there were daring to hope for a return to a more normal life.
We've been at war for 3 years now, and I don't see an end to it. We're hoping things will be okay, especially since everyone my age is in the reserves. But it's already been going on for 3 years.
I believe that it is the best interest of Lebanon and Israel to have a ceasefire, and hopefully both countries will be wise enough to hold it.
Now, Iran-backed Hezbollah, which has been pummeled by Israeli strikes and engaged in forces on the ground in the south, has indicated that it will respect the truce unless Lebanon is attacked again. The fighting broke out in Lebanon on the 2nd of March, when Hezbollah fired rockets at Israel a few days after the start of the Iran war, in retribution for the killing of Iran's former supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. As the ceasefire came into effect, Israel's military said it had struck over 380 Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon and was on high alert to resume strikes. The Lebanese army also reported violations of the ceasefire by Israel, including intermittent shelling of several southern Lebanese villages, and called on citizens to hold off on returning to southern villages and towns. There was no immediate comment from the Israeli military. Visuals also showed smoke rising from a Lebanese village near the border with Israel. Now, earlier, Trump said that he had spoken to both the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Lebanese President Joseph Aoun. He said he expected Netanyahu and Aoun to visit the White House over the next 4 or 5 days.
We just made a deal with Lebanon. As of 2 hours from now, we have a ceasefire with Israel and Lebanon, and that'll be great. And they'll be meeting, probably coming to the White House over the next 4 or 5 days. And that'll be the first time they've met in 44 years, which is pretty unneighborly when considering they're neighbors. But there's a really good chance that that'll work out with Lebanon and Israel. I met with, through the telephone, with the president of Lebanon, who's a really good guy, highly respected, and with Bibi. And I think there's a chance we'll be meeting right here.
A top-level face-to-face meeting between the Lebanese and Israeli leadership would be a watershed moment for the region. But it remains to be seen whether it will take place. Netanyahu said the ceasefire with Lebanon offered an opportunity for a historic peace agreement with Beirut, but insisted the disarmament of Hezbollah remains the precondition.
We eliminated Nasrallah, and this balance has changed in such a way that we began to receive calls from Lebanon in the last month to hold direct peace talks between us and them, something that had not happened in over 40 years. I responded to this call and I agreed to a timeout, or rather a temporary ceasefire of 10 days to try to advance the agreement that we began to discuss with the ambassadors meeting in Washington.
Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salam welcomed Trump's announcement, but the Lebanese President Joseph Aoun reportedly rejected Trump's request for a direct call with Netanyahu. But he did say that direct negotiations with Israel were crucial.
Direct negotiations are crucial, and a ceasefire is the gateway to proceeding with negotiations. Consolidate a ceasefire, secure the withdrawal of Israeli forces from the occupied southern territories, recover prisoners, and address outstanding border disputes.
Meanwhile, Hezbollah has said that it was keeping its finger on the trigger in case of any Israeli violations of a ceasefire, and Iranian state television portrayed the ceasefire as the result of Iran's insistence, alongside Hezbollah's resistance. What complicates all this optimism around the ceasefire is this. Despite the truce, Israel has said that it will maintain a 10-kilometer security zone along the border in southern Lebanon.
The Israeli army holds and will continue to hold all the places it has cleared and conquered. The ground maneuver into Lebanon and the attacks on Hezbollah all over Lebanon have achieved many achievements, but have not yet been completed.
Now, Israel's defense minister has also insisted that the campaign against Hezbollah was not yet complete, warning that if the fighting resumed, displaced residents would have to evacuate once again. And according to details of the truce released by the US State Department, Israel retains the right to continue targeting Hezbollah, specifically to prevent what it calls planned, imminent or ongoing attacks. In other words, the ceasefire does not mean an end to strikes. It builds room for it to take place. The truce also places responsibility on Lebanon to take meaningful steps and to stop Hezbollah from attacking Israel. That's where the problem is, because this truce demands two opposite things. Lebanon is expected to prevent attacks, even as Israel reserves the right to keep striking inside Lebanese territory. So can the Lebanese state realistically enforce these terms? And more importantly, can Hezbollah be expected to step back and play nice? We'll have to wait and watch. The United States is the largest arms industry in the world. It's a multi-billion-dollar machine, a machine capable of fueling multiple wars at once. But any machine can hit a snag. It can break down if pushed too far. Looks like that is happening to the US arms machine as well. Reports say US weapons shipments to Europe have been delayed. We're talking about contracted weapons, things that have already been purchased by Europe. Washington is unable to deliver them. Why? US officials say because of the war in Iran. In 40-odd days of fighting, the United States has burnt through a lot of its arsenal. Consider the Tomahawk missiles. The Americans fired more than 850 of these at Iran. They only produce around 80 a year. So in 40 days, they burnt through a decade of supplies. And the result? Shipments elsewhere are being hurt. It's not clear which countries or what weapons have been hit, but reports suggest Baltic and Scandinavian countries are facing delays. And this is significant. Baltic countries include the likes of Estonia and Latvia. Scandinavian states include Sweden and Norway. And what is common among them? Some of them share a border with Russia. The others are very close to a Russian border, meaning they are frontline NATO states against Moscow. For them, these delays are a huge concern. Most of these purchases were made under the FMS program. It stands for Foreign Military Sales. It's basically a government-to-government deal. Foreign states approach the United States for weapon systems. The US government approves it. Finally, private companies deliver it. But that last part has been delayed. American officials talk about two main reasons here. One is the logistical issue. The US arms industry has been heating up since 2022. First, supplying arms to Ukraine, then to Israel, and now to its own war machine against Iran. So the fear is America's stockpiles are running low. As a result, priority will be given to America's war needs first. Only then can foreign shipments be made. The second reason is political. Trump is unhappy about the NATO alliance. Neither did they join the war against Iran, nor did they help open the Strait of Hormuz. So US officials say Trump could be getting even with Europe. Of course, the Europeans are not happy. Reports say they are looking at alternatives within the continent. So here's the big question. How serious is the US production gap? From the looks of it, pretty serious. Washington is looking at auto companies to plug the gap. Defense officials have met with senior executives from Ford and General Motors. They want to see if the car makers can help out. How? By making vehicles, munitions, and components. No agreements have been struck yet, but the idea isn't new. Think back to the Second World War. Ford and General Motors supplied the US military. At its peak, Ford factories were churning out one bomber per hour. We saw a similar arrangement during COVID as well. Ford shifted to making PPE kits en masse. Now, just to be clear, the United States isn't asking these companies to make entire weapons. They want them to pitch in with parts and components, basically to speed up the supply chain. The question is, will it work? That depends on how quickly these companies can adapt, how quickly the factories can be updated. Either way, this push is an indicator of how desperate the United States is. Trump made his first move in January. He stopped US arms makers from issuing dividends. They could do so only if they expanded their output. Lockheed Martin responded by increasing production of Patriot missiles. It's basically all hands on deck in the United States. Some reports say it could take 5 years to replenish the stocks, to reach the pre-Iran war levels. So expect the United States to focus inward in the coming months and years. If you're a US ally, now is the time to look elsewhere. If you're a US rival or arms competitor, now is the time to cash in. The conflict in West Asia is hitting farms and food markets across the world, from the banana glut in India's Maharashtra to rising food prices in the Gulf. The ripple effects are getting harder to ignore. Global supply chains are under pressure. Fuel, fertilizer, and food all are being affected. So how exactly is this crisis reshaping what we grow, what we export, and ultimately what we eat? Here's our report.
Imagine this. A banana farmer in Maharashtra is destroying his own crop because halfway across the world, a narrow strip of water is in crisis. That strip being the Strait of Hormuz. Right now, it is quietly deciding what the world eats and how much it pays for it. The shock does not stay at sea. It travels straight to your plate. Let's start with India. The western state of Maharashtra is the country's banana belt. Just weeks ago, farmers were expecting a strong export season. The Gulf markets were ready. Containers were lined up. But now, those same containers are stuck. Exports to countries like Iran, Iraq, and the UAE have slowed to a crawl. Cold storages are filling up, and the fruit, it doesn't wait. So what happens next? Farmers are forced to dump their produce in the domestic market, and this has resulted in oversupply. When supply rises but demand stays the same, the prices will fall. In February, bananas were selling at 18 rupees to 22 rupees per kilo. By March, it dropped to 8 rupees to 10 rupees, and in April, just 2 to 3 rupees. That's an almost 86 to 88% decrease. Some farmers are now destroying their crops because selling them costs more than actually letting them rot. Take basmati rice, for example, India's premium export product. Shipments are facing delays due to the war in West Asia. The result? In March, exports fell 15% year-on-year. Onions tell a similar story. At Asia's largest onion market, prices have halved. Many farmers are selling the vegetable at a loss. Exports to Gulf countries have fallen nearly 45%. Then come the ripple effects. Spices, tea, coffee, they're not entirely collapsing, but they are under pressure. Even the meat and dairy industry is hit hard, and processed foods are also struggling. Put it all together, and India's $11.8 billion agri-food export pipeline to West Asia is under serious stress. The same crisis is reshaping food prices differently across the world. Let's take a look at what's getting costly and what's sliding towards the cheaper side. In India, some things are becoming cheaper, at least temporarily, like bananas, onions, seasonal vegetables, because of oversupply. But at the same time, essentials are getting more expensive. Edible oils, because India imports them. Fertilizers, prices have nearly doubled in recent tenders. Transport costs are rising with fuel prices, and that feeds into everything, from packaged foods to restaurant bills. Now look at the Gulf, places like the UAE and Saudi Arabia. They don't have the luxury of oversupply, they import over 70% of their food. So for them, almost everything gets more expensive. Rice, wheat, fruits, meat, packaged food, because the routes they depend on are disrupted and insurance costs are rising. In Iran, the story is different again. Locally produced staples remain relatively stable, but imported goods becoming scarce and expensive, squeezed by both sanctions and by supply disruptions. Europe and the United States are feeling it too, just in more indirect ways. A few imported seasonal goods are seeing minimal impact. But higher fertilizer costs are pushing up farm output prices, and that trickles down into processed food, dairy, and even bakery products. So what started as a naval standoff is now a global food story, with consequences that are landing quite literally on dinner tables around the world.
Now let's talk about India and Pakistan, a relationship defined by mistrust and tensions, and particularly so in the last 1 year. By the Pahalgam terror attack in April 2025, by India's response through Operation Sindoor, and by Pakistan's military humiliation. Since then, trust has only fallen further. Ties have remained cold, and every international platform has turned into a battle of narratives. Yet, behind this public hostility, a different story may have been unfolding. Quiet contacts may have continued, away from cameras, away from the headlines, and far from the public eye. A new report is out. It says India and Pakistan have held backchannel talks. That too, just 2 months after Operation Sindoor. Now, what are backchannel talks? They are unofficial or low-key contacts. These are used when formal relations are frozen, when public talks are politically difficult, and when both sides want to pass messages and do so quietly. According to this report, there have been at least 4 such engagements since last year's conflict. These were reportedly Track 1.5 and Track 2 dialogues. Let me break this down for you. You see, Track 1.5 talks usually involve a mix. It includes former officials, strategic experts, think tank members, and sometimes serving representatives in any informal capacity. Track 2 talks are even more discreet. There are no official negotiators, no formal decisions, just non-government participants. This is used to test ideas, to reduce tensions, or understand the other side's position. Now, like I said, these meetings were allegedly held at 4 places: London, Muscat, Thailand, and most recently in Qatar's capital, Doha. There is no official confirmation on this, and we do not know if this is true. But if it turns out to be true, then it is a significant development. Because officially, India and Pakistan are not on talking terms. In fact, the last known direct contact between the two was between the Directors General of Military Operations, or the DGMOs of India and Pakistan. In those talks, Pakistan requested a ceasefire from India. Since then, No major public political engagement has happened, no high-level visits, no peace process, and no diplomatic reset. That is why this report stands out. What makes it even more stark is the timing. We are just days away from the first anniversary of the Pahalgam terror attack, a dastardly attack that killed 26 innocent people. And it changed the course of India-Pakistan relations. You know how that ended with Operation Sindoor. India's response that changed the cost of escalation and exposed Pakistan's security weaknesses. Islamabad was left scrambling. Its claims of deterrence looked hollow. Its strategic gaps were exposed, and its military image took a serious hit. Reports since then have suggested that key sites like Noor Khan Air Base near Islamabad have been fortified. This is reportedly to prepare for any future strike scenario. That tells you something. The impact of Operation Sindoor did not end when the firing stopped. It continued long after the conflict was over. And in the months that followed, the rivalry shifted to diplomatic forums. At the United Nations, the two sides have clashed repeatedly over terrorism, over Pakistan's comments on Kashmir, and over regional security. Meanwhile, Pakistan has also tried to stay diplomatically relevant, particularly by positioning itself as the mediator in the current US-Iran talks, hosting talks, engaging regional capitals, and trying to project itself as a useful interlocutor. But image management does not erase cruel realities, and it does not remove India's core concern, cross-border terrorism. But talking does not mean trust. Contact does not mean concessions. If these reports are true, India is likely testing Pakistan's position, repeating that terror has consequences, and preventing any fresh miscalculations. For Pakistan, the calculation might be slightly different. Its economy is under pressure. Its image needs a major rebrand, and last year's setback still shadows it. So it needs space, it needs engagement, and it needs relevance. But do not confuse contact with normalization. The core issues still remain. And until that changes, the big picture will not. And staying with Pakistan, a country perpetually on the brink, perpetually in debt, and now perpetually performing. Because what is happening in Pakistan today is not policy. It's theatre. Elaborate, expensive, desperate theatre, with Donald Trump sitting in the front row, and Islamabad doing everything it can to make sure he applauds. Let's begin with the crypto move. This week, the State Bank of Pakistan lifted its 8-year ban on crypto banking. These are the details. Pakistani banks can now open accounts for licensed crypto companies. Until now, this wasn't possible. Crypto firms were cut off from the banking sector. This ban was imposed back in 2018, but now it has been lifted. Banks can open accounts and offer other services to crypto companies. Having said that, there is a crucial rider. The banks themselves cannot enter this business. They cannot buy, hold, or trade crypto, not using their own funds or using customer funds. Nonetheless, this is a huge boost, one that could significantly expand Pakistan's crypto scene. And this isn't an isolated move. Consider what happened in early 2025. Trump returns to power. Within weeks, executives from World Liberty Financial fly to Islamabad, and guess who owns this company? Donald Trump and his advisor Steve Witkoff. On paper, they don't handle the business. It's their sons who run the day-to-day affairs. But the conflict of interest it's stark. Because look at Trump's policies. At home, he's mainstreaming the crypto industry. Abroad, he's asking his allies to do it as well. and Pakistan is more than happy to oblige. In Islamabad, the World Liberty team met the Prime Minister. They smiled for cameras, and then, almost on cue, Pakistan issued an ordinance to build a national crypto framework. It also signed a memorandum of understanding with World Liberty Financial to explore the Trump family's USD1 stablecoin for cross-border payments. Then a separate $2 billion tokenization deal with Binance. Now here's the point that many miss. Pakistan had 40 million crypto users trading through informal channels, even when the ban was in place. The economic case for legalization existed for years. But Islamabad waited for the moment it could hand this gift to someone who mattered in Washington. And that moment arrived the day Donald Trump was sworn in again. But wait, the crypto deals are only half of that story. Because simultaneously, Pakistan is running an even more audacious gambit, the Iran war, which has already rattled the global economy. And Pakistan, a country with a broken economy and restless army, has appointed itself peacemaker. Islamabad hosted American and Iranian delegations for 21 hours of peace talks last weekend. Pakistan calls this the Islamabad process.
It is imperative that the parties continue to uphold their commitment to ceasefire. The DPM has also reiterated that Pakistan has been and will continue to play its role to facilitate engagement and dialogue between the two countries in the days to come.
A grand phrase designed to suggest permanence and prestige, a new diplomatic order anchored in South Asia. But read the fine print. Let's read the fine print here. The Financial Times reported that the US pushed Pakistan to broker the ceasefire. Pakistan was not invited. It was deployed. It had channels to Tehran, and it was desperate enough to say yes to whatever Washington asked. And desperate it certainly is. Pakistan's own defense minister had to frantically delete a social media post calling Israel, and I'm quoting, cancerous. The mask slipped, and it was hastily replaced. Because when you are auditioning to be America's diplomatic errand boy, you cannot afford opinions. The talks, of course, collapsed. Pakistan entered the world stage, hoping to clear its image. What it got instead was a photograph with US Vice President J.D. Vance. This is the grand bargain Islamabad has struck with Donald Trump. You get your markets for your family's crypto firm. You get our capital city as your negotiating venue. You get our army chief as your personal courier guy. And in return, we get to look important. So is this crypto business the foundation of Trump's love for Pakistan? Or is there a strategic thought behind it? Chances are it's a mix of both. Let's talk about India's latest power move, one that may worry China. India's Mazagon Dock Shipbuilders has acquired a controlling stake in Colombo Dockyard, the largest shipbuilding and repair facility in Sri Lanka. Not only is this the first ever international acquisition by an Indian shipyard, but it is also a major step in expanding India's maritime footprint. It provides India with a strategic foothold in Colombo Port, which is one of the busiest maritime hubs in the Indian Ocean region. It also is a strategic move to counter China's growing maritime influence in this region. Here's a report. India has just made a quiet but important move in Sri Lanka. An Indian government-owned shipbuilding company, the Mazagon Dock Shipbuilders Limited, has secured a controlling 51% stake in Colombo Dockyard PLC for $26.8 million. That is approximately 249 crore rupees, marking the first international shipyard acquisition ever undertaken by an Indian company. On paper, it looks like just another smart commercial investment. But if you stop there, you're missing the real story. India has made a strategic move in the middle of an increasingly crowded Indian Ocean. Mazagon Dock itself called this a strategic foothold in a critical maritime corridor. And that crowd is not exactly friendly. So why does it matter? To understand, let's start with how this deal came about. It follows the exit of Japan's Onomichi dockyard, which had controlled the facility for decades. It withdrew after financial strain, forcing Colombo dockyard to look for a new strategic partner. Nearly 40 global players were in the fray. But in the end, the board picked India's Mazagon dock for its financial strength, technical capability, and experience in building warships and submarines. MDL has built over 30 warships and 8 submarines for the Indian Navy. The deal gives India a controlling stake in Sri Lanka's largest shipbuilding and repair facility. Indian officials say the Sri Lankan government itself encouraged New Delhi to step in and back Indian investors. The transaction gives MDL operational control over a 4 dry dock facility located within the port of Colombo, with a maximum vessel capacity of 125,000 deadweight tons. And Colombo is not just another port. It sits on one of the busiest shipping routes in the world, connecting Asia, West Asia, Africa, and Europe. It is a key link in sea lanes that also connect to East Asia, including China. And this dockyard sits right inside that network, which means India is no longer just passing through these waters. It has, quite literally, dropped an anchor. It now has a fixed operational presence at a critical maritime junction. This move also needs to be seen in the context of China's expanding footprint. In the Indian Ocean over the past decades, Beijing has invested heavily in ports and infrastructure across the region, including projects under the Belt and Road Initiative such as Colombo Port City and major terminals, a strategy often referred to as the string of pearls. In Sri Lanka itself, China already controls Hambantota port on a long-term lease. That has been a consistent concern for India. Because in the Indian Ocean, ports are never just ports. This is where India's move becomes clearer. By taking control of the Colombo dockyard, India is ensuring a critical maritime facility in Sri Lanka does not drift into the same orbit. The deal also signals deeper strategic alignment between India and Sri Lanka, with backing from broader US partnerships in the region. It also fits into what analysts describe as India's counter approach, the necklace of diamonds. Strategists have a name for what India is doing here. The phrase necklace of diamonds was first mentioned by India's former Foreign Secretary, Lalit Mansingh, while speaking at a think tank in August 2011 on India's regional strategic priorities. He argued that India was protecting its interests by building naval cooperation across the Indian Ocean, a counter to China's string of pearls. However, it is important to note that despite its popular use by analysts, the term does not appear formally in Government of India doctrine. Instead of replicating China's model, India is building a network of access, partnerships, and now selective control. And this approach is not just naval. There's a growing focus on air and space domain cooperation to complement maritime strategy. So what does India really get from this deal? This deal gives India 3 clear advantages. 1, operational reach. Indian naval and commercial vessels can be serviced closer to key sea lanes. Less distance, faster response. It could also support US Navy vessels in the future under existing India-US ship repair agreements. Number 2, strategic presence. A physical foothold inside Colombo Port, and you're not a visitor anymore. You're inside the system. Number 3, influence. Because infrastructure shapes long-term alignment, and that's the long game, especially in a country like Sri Lanka, which has been balancing ties between India, China, and the United States for years. New Delhi has already committed billions in aid and investments after Sri Lanka's 2022 economic crisis. This is not gunboat diplomacy. This is called infrastructure diplomacy. Investment and operational control of key infrastructure in Colombo Port fits perfectly into India's strategic vision of being a net security provider and the preferred security partner in the Indian Ocean region. And moves like this are how influence is built in today's world, quietly and strategically. The power dynamics in the Indian Ocean are changing, and India is shifting from a defensive posture to strengthening its maritime presence, all the while monitoring new and old security threats to the region. A cluster of cases, a surge in questions, and a lot of very online conclusions. Over the past 3 years, a series of deaths and disappearances involving scientists in the United States has drawn increasing attention. Why is that? Because of the pattern they appear to form. Many of the individuals were connected to nuclear research, aerospace programs, or high security environments. And when those worlds overlap with unexplained incidents, the story tends to grow quickly. The names at the center of this mystery are Melissa Cassius, a scientist with security clearance at the Los Alamos National Laboratory, who vanished in June 2025. Anthony Chavez, a retired Los Alamos worker who went missing in May 2025. Jason Thomas, who led the chemical biology team at Novartis, who first went missing on the 12th of December 2025. His body was later found on the 18th of March this year. Frank Maywald, an engineer at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory, who died in 2024. He was known for his work on advanced space instruments. His death was reported without a public cause or autopsy. Nuno Loureiro, an MIT physicist who was shot dead in December 2025. Carl Gilmer, known for exoplanet research, who was shot dead on the front porch of his home this year on the 16th of February. Number 7, Steven Garcia, linked to a company producing non-nuclear components for US nuclear systems, who went missing on August 28, 2025. Reports say he served as a property custodian, a high-level role that reportedly granted him top security clearance and oversight of hundreds of millions of dollars worth of equipment. Monica Jacinto Riza, an aerospace engineer who disappeared while hiking on the 22nd of June 2025. Michael David Hicks, a NASA research scientist in the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, died on the 30th of July 2023. And then there is one of the most closely watched cases. Retired Air Force Major General William Neil McCaslin, a former commander of the Air Force Research Laboratory known for overseeing sensitive, high-level aerospace projects, who vanished from his home in New Mexico on the 27th of February this year. His phone, his glasses, and personal devices were left behind, but this is where it gets interesting. His wallet, hiking boots, and a .38 caliber revolver were missing. Now, investigators noted he had reportedly experienced mental fog before vanishing. His name, it's important to note, had also surfaced years prior in emails released by WikiLeaks, where he was referenced in conversations about UAPs. These are unidentified anomalous phenomena. That detail, unsurprisingly, has done a lot of heavy lifting online. His family, however, has firmly rejected speculation that he had any knowledge related to alien material. The conversation and speculations have now spilled beyond Reddit threads and forums and have now reached the president. And that is not surprising. As per the president himself, Donald Trump, these were important people overseeing important projects. This is what he said on being asked if these cases are linked, and I'm quoting. He says, "I hope it is random, but we are going to know in the next week and a half." Pretty serious stuff, hopefully. I don't know, coincidence, whatever you want to call it. But some of them were very important people, and we're going to look into it. So Trump says we should have answers soon. Meanwhile, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt acknowledged these reports, stating that she had not been briefed yet, but if accurate, the matter would warrant investigation. So at the moment, the official position is this: being looked into but not yet explained. Here's where things get complicated. Individually, these cases fall into similar categories: violent crime, accidents, health-related deaths, missing persons investigations. There is no single confirmed link tying them all together, but collectively, they do share similar professional backgrounds, proximity in time, and connections to sensitive fields. And that is enough to create the sense of a pattern, whether or not one actually exists. At this point, the discussion has split into three broad tracks. Number one, coincidence. the most evidence-supported explanation. There are thousands of scientists working in nuclear and aerospace sectors. Over time, unrelated incidents can cluster in ways that may feel meaningful, may not be satisfying for the online theorists, but statistically plausible. Number 2, security concerns. A more serious possibility is whether individuals in sensitive roles could be targets. Now, it isn't a stretch to speculate that scientists linked to strategic programs could be of interest to foreign intelligence or corporate espionage networks. However, there is currently no public evidence suggesting a coordinated campaign behind these specific cases. Not yet. Number 3 is speculation, of course. There is the part of the internet that has connected this to classified programs, hidden breakthroughs, and UAP-related research, which is fair. This is largely driven by McCaslin UAP connection and broader conversations around UFOs. And it doesn't help when we hear statements like this one. Listen to this.
As we convene here, UAP are in our airspace, but they are grossly underreported. These sightings are not rare or isolated, they are routine. Military aircrew and commercial pilots, trained observers whose lives depend on accurate identification, are frequently witnessing these phenomena.
That was Ryan Grace, a former U.S. Navy pilot who has become a leading voice on unidentified aerial phenomena. He said this during a UFO congressional hearing back in 2023. But just to be clear, currently there is no verified evidence linking these incidents to UFOs or extraterrestrial claims. So what is the real story here? This is unfolding at a moment when governments are discussing UAPs more openly. Declassification is a public issue, and trust in official explanations is, at best, selective. But this is also not a completely ordinary story, far from it. It sits in that uncomfortable middle ground where enough has happened to raise questions, but not enough to answer them. Now, say you take a drug that helps you lose weight. You feel great, you look better, your clothes fit, and then slowly, something else starts happening. You look at a birthday cake and feel nothing. You watch a sunset, still nothing. You feel distant with close friends and family. This isn't a horror story. It is something people are going through on weight loss drugs. And it's important because these drugs are no longer a fad. They are everywhere. They are becoming the new normal. But do we really know everything about them? And especially their side effects? Let's break it down. First, the drugs, Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, Zepbound, and many more such names. These are all GLP-1 drugs. They are named after a hormone your gut naturally releases after you eat. That hormone tells your brain, okay, we're full, so you stop eating now. These drugs mimic that signal, but much more intensely. So people start losing the weight. Some lose even 25% of their body weight. Now here's the thing. These drugs were originally cleared for type 2 diabetes. Now they are aiding weight loss. And with patents expiring and cheaper generics flooding the market, they are the new normal. But this new normal comes with some unforeseen consequences. Let's start with the most straightforward problem. Yes, you are losing fat on these drugs, but you are also losing muscle. Clinical data shows that 20 to 40% of the weight loss isn't fat. It is, in fact, lean muscle mass. These drugs kill your appetite. So you simply don't eat enough, especially protein. And without protein, your body starts cannibalizing its own muscle tissue for energy. So you end up losing muscle. Then there's the Ozempic face. If you suddenly see someone with their face hollowed out, gaunt, well, there is a name for it. It's called Ozempic face. And it is exactly what it sounds like. When your body loses weight rapidly, which is what these drugs do, it pulls fat from everywhere, including your face. So your cheeks sink in, your eyes hollow out, your skin sags, and you look older than usual. In fact, it's gotten so bad for some people that people are now trying to reverse it. They're offering what is called Ozempic face reversal, dermal fillers, radio frequency treatments, and cheek implants. But it's not just physical change. Many are experiencing something called anhedonia. the inability to feel pleasure. Many on these GLP-1 drugs are experiencing this. They don't enjoy things they enjoyed before. The internet is calling it Ozempic personality. So why is this happening? These drugs work by mimicking a hormone that regulates appetite, but that same system is deeply connected to dopamine. That is the brain's reward chemical. In some cases, these drugs don't just mute appetite. The drugs also tone the regions of the brain associated with pleasure. Sometimes it even affects the love life of people. Nearly 60% of singles on GLP-1 drugs notice changes in their dating lives. 16% reported their desire dropped outright. And here's the thing, weight loss drugs are not bad drugs. For millions, they're genuinely life-changing. The metabolic benefits are real. The weight loss is real. But we are in the early innings of understanding them, of what they actually do to our body and the brain. These drugs have been around less than a decade, and they're now being taken by hundreds of millions of people globally. And the question nobody is asking is this: what are we trading? If you're going to take these drugs, make sure you do your research and consult a medical professional. There is no reason to panic already, but it's important we pay attention. At a Pentagon worship service, U.S. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth decided to lead a prayer, which so far so holy. But then instead of a Bible verse, he apparently channeled Pulp Fiction, the classic film from the year 1994. Yes, his prayers appeared to paraphrase the fictional Ezekiel 25:17 that Samuel L. Jackson's character said in the film. The internet, of course, was not going to let this one go, with users wondering if Sunday service had turned into movie night. And honestly, at this point, reality is writing better satire than the internet could ever come up with. Now, before we move on, we would like to share our brand new show lineup that kicks off this weekend. Join us every Saturday and Sunday at 7 p.m. for Deep Dive Explainers that decode geopolitics, business, technology, and health. This Saturday, our show, Your Political Therapist, premieres at 7 p.m. IST, which will unpack the history of US-Iran relations and explain how we got to where we are today. Then, on Sunday, 7 p.m. IST, our show Ripple will explore the role of AI in cricket to show how technology is changing the game forever. But we know Sundays shouldn't be all business. So at 12 p.m. IST, join creator Ozzy Bhai for a sharp, hilarious look at history's weirdest incidents in Aussie Guy Reviews History. Because as it turns out, the past is far more bizarre than you remember. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Canada, a gathering broke the world record for the largest gathering of people in dinosaur costumes. Brazilian President Lula da Silva was seen working out at a gym, and an elusive wolf in South Korea returned to the zoo after 9 days. Finally, taking you back in history, on this day in 1983, India conducted the fourth and the final test flight of its SLV-3 rocket, the nation's pioneering experimental satellite launch vehicle. The mission orbited India's Rohini satellite, marking a major milestone It signaled the country's entry into the global space race. Leaving you on that note, thank you so much for watching. See you next week.
Aqui não tem PowerPoint, aqui não tem IA, aqui é isso, todo dia. Meu marido já tá aqui desde as 6 da manhã, já fez 45 minutos de esteira e agora tá aqui, ó. Quem disse que ele não conseguia fazer essa flexão? Tá ao vivo, gente, é ao vivo. Quem sabe faz ao vivo. Olha aí. O bichinho já tá aqui desde as 6 da manhã. Eu falei, não, hoje eu vou olhar.